House on the Hill, an extended parable and photographs by Doug Cable. A while ago, on a nearby planet, there was a certain small village, just an ordinary village on an ordinary planet. This village had none of what we call modern conveniences, but it was filled with honest, hard-working individuals. Well, most were anyway. On the outskirts of this village, there was a handsome house built on a sizable hill that was surrounded by an imposing high wall. The hill was high enough that the house could be seen above the wall, and in the evening people in the village could see the tall windows illuminated from within and see the shadows of inhabitants moving past the windows. People in the village had nothing to do with those in the house, as they called it, and nobody was ever observed going in or coming out. At the gate, two imposing guards were always on duty, but they never smiled nor talked to the villagers. Over time, a sort of mystical fear was built up concerning the house. And on rare occasions, somebody would get brave and attempt to get over the wall and enter the grounds behind the wall to see what was inside. Some would build a crude ladder with the primitive tools available. Or some might take a long pole and try to run and vault over the wall. While none of these ever actually succeeded, some got high enough that they could briefly see the beautiful grounds behind the wall. After they recovered from the injuries received when they fell back to the ground outside the wall, these individuals were honored as wise men, and they founded schools where they taught the great lessons they had learned during their viewing behind the wall. An intricate body of learning and theology was built up concerning these wise men. It so happened there was a certain young man in the village. Well, actually, he had been young, only a few years ago. Since the village was in a primitive land, there were no railroad tracks. But if it did have them, this young man lived on the wrong side of them. This young man never seemed to be able to keep a job, being more interested in daydreaming about the house than on working in anything profitable. His appearance was, shall we say, a bit unappealing. His hair was long and tangled, his beard looked like a bird's nest. He had never been particularly acquainted with washing things, especially himself. Since he had no occupation, he still lived with his parents, who were not much happy with the situation. One evening, as they were finishing their simple supper, he calmly made his announcement. "Tomorrow I will go to the house." His mother gasped and put her hands over her mouth. His father's eyes popped wide open, and he growled, "And just who is going to pay for the lessons, eh?" "I don't need lessons. I have it all figured out." Surprisingly, he even sounded confident. His mother wiped away her tears and pleaded, "Send for someone to come and talk sense into him." His father went out and was gone for some time. While they waited, his mother sniffled and wiped her eyes from time to time, while the young man looked confident and scratched his beard. In good time the father returned, followed by a well-fed wise man and a pair of his followers, who were scrawny and painfully young. The wise man stood up with all his height and girth, looked down his nose, and expounded sonorously. "I understand you anticipate attempting going to the house. Just how are you going to accomplish this stupendous task? I understand you have no training at all in such matters." He looked the man up and down, thought about saying more, but only added, "Well?" The young man smiled, walked over to the wise man, and whispered something in his ear. Instantly, the wise man had a startled look on his face. Then he jerked, fainted, and collapsed to the floor as if deflated by a sudden pinprick. His scrawny follower struggled to drag him out of the humble house and into the fresh air to revive him. The young man had a strange smirk on his face, and his parents were too puzzled to know how to react. The next morning, the young man got up early, wearing his least rumpled cloak, quickly ate a crust of bread, and walked confidently out of the house toward the outskirts on the far side of town. There was a spring in his step. He wore a sparkling smile, and even spoke brightly to those he passed. Those who saw him scratched their heads and wondered what was wrong with him, if perhaps he had found some happy juice. When he reached the outskirts, he confidently walked up to the gate in front of the house and spoke to the startled guards. "I would like to go to the house." If you felt nervous, there was no sign of it. The guards stood at attention. One said, "Certainly, sir," while the other went to a small house just inside the gate. Presently he returned, along with a distinguished gentleman wearing a long white robe and sandals. "I understand you wish to enter the house." "Yes." There was no apparent reaction or surprise. "Certainly, sir. Follow me, please." The young man followed him into the gatehouse. The gentleman looked him up and down before continuing. "You understand we need to clean you up a bit, so you will be presentable." A look of worry passed over the young man's face before he nodded. We will spare the gory details, but the hapless young man was subjected to a furious scrubbing, cleaning, and trimming. The young man was unused to such seemingly harsh treatment, but withstood the onslaught bravely. Dare we say, with faith? Presently he emerged, hair and beard well trimmed and groomed, wearing a white robe with a hem trimmed in gold. His sandals were soft, new, and fit splendidly. The gentleman and the young man slowly walked up the path toward the house, taking their time looking at the sights, discussing the wonders they observed. At the house, the gentleman opened the door and motioned the young man inside, saying, "I leave you here. Congratulations, sir." As the door closed behind him, the young man looked around a magnificent room which had a high ceiling and gilded walls covered with colorful wall hangings and bright mirrors. The wood floor was well polished, but his eyes were fixed on the stately personage seated on a platform at the end of the large room. He approached the platform and started to kneel, but a pleasant, commanding voice stopped him. "No, come up here and sit beside me. How may I help you?" After sitting down and taking a moment to compose himself, the young man timorously asked, "Why? Why did you permit me to come here, into the house?" "Because, young man, you asked." "Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. And to him who knocks, the door of salvation will be opened." And further, all genuine spirit-born petitions are certain of an answer. Ask, and you shall receive. But you should remember that you are progressive creatures of time and space. Therefore must you constantly reckon with the time-space factor in the experience of your personal reception of the full answers to your manifold prayers and petitions. Thank you.